we're here today. We'll be off for a few weeks, and our target is to finish by the end of close to the end of January, the sections that we're working on. We have a little bit more leeway because the wedding we were supposed to go to was just called off because it's Israelis that are involved in the wedding. So as we do in this difficult time of war and suffering, we devote our study to lifting our souls and lifting the memories of those who have already lost their lives and those who are being held hostage, those innocent children, especially in Gaza Strip, who are suffering because of their parents' mistakes, I think. And we ask that we find the strength to continue in our good deeds and coming together in positive interaction. Amen.
Amen. Was Richard humble last night, or did it go to his head?
Let's see. I thought I saw him on.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is that Richard does have something other than t-shirts to wear. He actually wore a button-down shirt yesterday.
Nice.
Very fancy. Yeah.
Richard
was. Go ahead.
I had a job once upon a time. That shirt is like 20 years old.
Okay. Well, Richard was, as expected, terribly embarrassed and bashful. I made him come up on stage, and we read something from his brother, who was very gracious, and his nephew. And that was a big surprise to Richard. And we presented him with two very, very valuable gifts. One is a dreidel, a hardwood, beautiful dreidel that a contemporary artist has created, and the dreidel was for him to gamble on Hanukkah with the dreidel, which dreidels usually were, so he can make some more money for Oram Midbar. And the abacus that he just held up is because he's had such trouble with his QuickBooks lately, and I just thought that maybe getting back to basics might help him.
But good turnout and got good support and feel good about it.
Yeah, thankfully we did. The place was pretty full. Yeah, we had a unexpected. I wasn't expecting a thunderstorm that kept some people away. I think there were at least 10, 15 cancellations last minute, but I think there were others that came without tickets. So the place was pretty full. Yeah. It was
Right.
It was nice. Thank you, and thank you to all of you who contributed. We really appreciate it. Okay, so shall we get to the study? Isaiah 45. Stephen, you've got some words of context for us?
Well, just I love the title you gave this. What was it?
How many times do I need to say it?
Yeah, that's it. And so I don't know that I have any.
Okay.
It's just now we're just really focused. I think what I do want to say is, in general, this is fresh biblically. This double down on the sovereignty of God, on this connection between creation and history. There are no other gods. Again, there's this sense of this Israel is servant for all the nations, and all will bow down at some point. And so there's a really almost unprecedented for this time when this came out biblically, a message of this transcendent power of Yahweh to do what none of the other gods, as we looked at last week in that whole section on idolatry where we spent last week. Now it just kind of reaffirms with this direct call to Cyrus, and reiterates that Cyrus is a tool, but also a king. I mean, Cyrus is given kind of the title of an Israelite king, it seems to me. So anyway, I guess we just get into it and see what happens.
Okay. All right then. Don, you want to start us off reading the first section? I forgot to put numbers, verses. I apologize.
Okay. Thus said God to Cyrus, the anointed one, having grasped his right hand, treading down nations before him, ungirding the loins of kings, opening doors before him and letting no gate stay shut. I will march before you and level the hills that loom up. I will shatter doors of bronze and cut down iron bars. I will give you treasures concealed in the dark and secret hoards, so that you may know that it is I, the Eternal One, the God of Israel, who calls you by name. For the sake of my servant Jacob, Israel, my chosen one, I call you by name. I hail you by title, though you have not known me. I am God, and there is none else. Besides me, there is no God. I gird you, though you may not have known me, so that they may know from east to west that there is none but me. I am God, and there is none else. I form light and create darkness. I make weal and create woe. I, God, do all these things.
Okay. So, some immediate reactions or questions.
David, the word, the Hebrew for God, is Elohim. Did I read that correctly? Or
So yeah, so no, usually it is. I'm experimenting with this new translation that came out in the last few years, the Jewish Publication Society, which had its initial translation in the early 20th century, which was kind of oldish English, imitating a little bit that Shakespearean or King James Version English, but was done based on scholarship, more up-to-date scholarship of 120 years ago. And then the new JPS translation that came out slowly, the Torah came out in the 60s, the prophets in the 70s, and towards the end of the 70s, maybe, yeah, I think towards the end of the 70s, the writings, which labeled in their publications mostly Tanakh. That's how you bought it, often in a one volume. And then recently, and I don't know if it's in print, I haven't done the research to see if it's actually in print, but it's on Sefaria. You can find it online, this new, more sensitive, not just gender, but gender sensitive, especially translation, inclusive translation, as you know from the church world as well. I have that Christian inclusive translation on my shelf here. And so I think that I think what they wanted to do was they wanted to get away from the Lord. So we don't have that. What they usually do is the Eternal One. They use the word eternal with capital letters, and I'm not sure what gave them, because in all these cases where you have God here, it's all Adonai, Yud He Vav He. So it's not Elohim in this case. That's a little bit confusing for those of us that that want to cover those kind of things. But the truth is, in my own translations, I've been doing that for decades now, in order to get away from the He and the Lord. Sometimes keep it in prayer, but also. So yeah, so that a long answer to your very short question. So no, it's actually Adonai, Yud He Vav He. Yahweh. Yeah.
Right.
So the phenomenal thing here really is that we've seen this formula, Ko Amar Adonai, right? Thus said the Lord. But it's to Jeremiah, to Ezekiel, to the people of Israel. It's like, so Cyrus is suddenly, and we met him last week, right, in the end, towards the end, but he's this major player in the theological world. He's in this historical understanding of the sacred history of Israel. He's like a major player now, not just as the Goyish king, he did this for us. No, he's really a central player here. And I think that influences some of the language that the author is using. We've seen this leveling of hills, I think always think of these big caterpillars, blowing up things so that the road can go flat through. We've seen that multiple times through our study in the last few weeks, right? In these chapters. And it starts with that. You notice how it says, it says opening in the beginning, opening doors before him, no gate stays shut, and march before you, and level the hills that loom up. We have that motif, but look what he's emphasizing afterwards, though, and I don't remember seeing this before. Shattered down doors of bronze, of iron bars, treasures, secret hoards. To me, that's king language, that's city language, that's mighty power language of an empire. And then towards the end in the second column, so that they may know from east to west, right? This is global. So in some ways, it reminds me of our study of the Acts of the Apostles, bringing that word of the experience of those Jews in Jerusalem out towards the Roman Empire. It's just this. Again, I'm not claiming there's an intentional connection there based on this chapter in Isaiah, but I feel the same motif is going on, right? We're announcing our presence as a people of God to all the world, and that's why it emphasizes so many times, I am God, I am God, I am God. Yes, I think you want to say something, Terry. Just need you to unmute first.
Especially when it says, and a couple of times, you have not known me. So it doesn't matter that Cyrus doesn't acknowledge God, doesn't, worship God, but he's still being blessed. It's incredible.
Right. And of course, the text is not talking to Cyrus. The author of the text, I don't think the author of the text had was under any impression that his words were going to get to Cyrus. He's talking to the people, the Israelites.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it says, thus said God to Cyrus. So is that metaphorical? Did it mean that God actually spoke to Cyrus? Does it mean that Cyrus should have been aware of this because of the community that he lived in? What does that mean?
Good question. So the author of the text wants us to think so, right? Wants to think so. I was speaking more from a critical point of view that whoever was writing this, I don't really think they thought this text was going to Cyrus, right? I think that
right, but is he saying that that Cyrus should know this? This is something Cyrus should know, or is he saying that God actually spoke? And if he spoke, did he speak in a dream? Did Cyrus hear this as a voice?
So again, there's historical reality, Richard, and there's the impression that the author's trying to give. The impression.
Yeah, okay, so it didn't historically happen. So, what is the author saying is happening here? So someone who read this, what are they thinking that Cyrus heard or
that God spoke directly to Cyrus? Because those are those words, that formula, Ko Amar Adonai, thus spoke the Lord, in most cases, or hearing God, is thought to be direct, not by Maimonides. Maimonides had his own interpretation, who said the only person who got face-to-face speaking contact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Moses. And even Abraham only saw, heard, experienced the conversation with God in a dream-like state. But the simple meaning of the text is, as it is written, as the impression the author wants to give the people, God spoke to Cyrus. And in that way, it's really so noteworthy. Yeah.
Well, also the reference to whom he grasped by his right hand. That seems to me to be a metaphor for closeness, a friend, and also he calls him his anointed, his Messiah, his Christ in the Greek.
Right, which makes this text rather very much of a template from a literary point of view, literary topos for, of course, what's going to happen afterwards. Don, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, I wanted to pick up on that anointed one too, and grasping of the hand. It kind of connotes familiarity and intimacy. Well, I was trying to think, and forgive me for my stupidity here, but the time period that this was happening, what was the political system? Was it a theocracy, or was it ruled by judges, or was there nothing when these words were spoken to Cyrus? It tends to me to show a deeper familiarity than what we were bringing out in the meaning or the section that we read. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm
Maybe.
not sure I entirely understood, but if I look at, this is after the destruction of the first temple.
Right. So
Okay.
what was the authority then?
So that's a really complex question so I think perhaps there's, I think Stephen and perhaps Frank here are more well-versed in some of the history than I am even. But my understanding is that we don't really know. There's different authors that claim certain types of leadership, Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah, those books there, but it's really unclear exactly what was happening going forward, right? There's some centuries there that we don't have a lot of information about. We start to have more information in the 2nd century BCE, because there's more writings about the time of the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees, etc. But I think it's, to my mind and my memory, it's very murky. But please, you guys, Frank and Stephen, if you've got something to enlighten, to help answer Don's question.
Well, I mean, again, I love how Isaiah weaves the creation. God is the creator who acts in history and continues to create through history. And even though Cyrus, who Don is slowly but surely gaining power, as he becomes the head of the Medes, and then, which has a Persian root. The Neo-Babylonian Empire is kind of waning, and Cyrus is clearly on the rise. He's gaining power, and so it's not a far fetch to see that Cyrus is going to carry the day here, and the idea that he has no idea who God is, doesn't know, but he's nonetheless being used or becomes an instrument for liberation for the people of Israel, who will be liberated. They'll return, be restored, and Cyrus is the agent for that. And that would have been, that return was what, 536-ish BCE?
Spread over, I think, many years, actually.
Yeah.
But
So-
I'm getting the impression that God knows Cyrus in a deeper way than maybe Cyrus knows God. That's all I think I'm saying.
That's a good read. Stephen, do you want to say Skopats? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that second to the last line. I make wheel. I'm not sure what that meant.
Okay, good. So I'm going to read it in Hebrew, and those that are familiar with our liturgy, the verse starts Ki ephes biladai, right? Because there is no one else. Ani Adonai, I am God. Ve'ein od, again, no one else. Yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei eta. Anybody want to complete that for me? And who's familiar with prayers? Okay, so usually Sid would. I don't. Sid. So anyway, Sid, you would remember, right? Yotzer or uvorei choshech,
Yotzer or choshech, oseh shalom uvorei es hakol.
Hakol. Excellent, Sid.
Right.
This
But
is
it's
a
not
quote.
Hakol, it's Ra.
Right. This is a quote right out of Isaiah, except for it was changed. So let me the literal translation that I would give is God, speaking about God, who there is no other, is the creator of light, the maker of darkness, the one who makes peace, and the one who creates evil. Ra, evil. Except for that was too much theologically for the rabbis of the Talmud. So they already in that time they changed it. So why don't you just everybody skip to the end of the source page. Today's extra biblical sources are just two excerpts from the traditional Jewish liturgy. And this is a blessing that is said every morning. It's the first blessing before the recitation of Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel. The Lord is God, the Lord is one. And this is the blessing of the physical light, the light of creation, right? Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, the former of light, the creator of darkness, the maker of peace, the creator of all things, as opposed to the creator of evil. Because that was thought to be, you know what, don't, in the grandmothers would say, don't open lo liftoch pe le Satan. Don't allow Satan to open his mouth, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Right? There must be don't jinx it, whatever. Don't. And so that's the translation of the Hebrew, that the part that we said right now, Stephen Skopas, I think is what you're more familiar with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That word wheel, I looked it up and it means a red swollen mark left on the flesh by a blow or pressure.
Yeah, I think they were looking for like a word play, kind of a wheel and woe.
Yeah.
Yes, Harold.
I haven't had a chance to look it up, so I'm not sure about what I'm about to say, but I think the word wheel, as a much older English word, is related to, there's a word commonweal, meaning the common good. And I think it has this other meaning like wealth, commonwealth. I think the wheel is a part of that.
I think, yeah, that would make sense here. Yeah, that would make more sense, of course. Right. But again, this repetition of I am God, there is no other. Hello, there is no other. Are you here? Can you not? What did I say that you didn't understand? I am God, okay. What part of that didn't you understand? Okay, anything else on this section? Okay, then. Megan, you want to read Pour Down, O Skies from Above?
Pour down, O skies from above. Let the heavens rain down victory. Let the earth open up and triumph sprout. Yes, let vindication spring up. I, God, have created it. Shame on anyone who argues with their maker, though not but a potsherd of earth. Shall the clay say to the potter, what are you doing? Your work has no handles. Shame on anyone who asks the Father, what are you begetting? Or a woman, what are you bearing?
Anyone care to solve this puzzle? It seems
Well,
like
it seems to anticipate a disbelief or a resistance to this idea that, this people who live in exile, this glorious restoration just seems inconceivable and maybe hard to believe, because at this point it comes in, you questioning it, are you anything I can't do? I'm God after all. So believe it. Kind of how it comes across to me.
It sort of, when I read it, it came across of don't you dare. You're just a piece of dirt. And comparing it to the clay and the maker and but it had after saying how great, as you said, how many times do I need to say it? And listen again. Don't you dare question me.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry if it was just a feeling I had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to my mind, it's the people just don't. They're in disbelief, right? You're talking to us. Look at us, and that's why this verse is such an important inspiration for the blessing every morning, when difficult things are happening, difficult things that we say that would lead people to feel there is no order, to unnerve people. One of the main purposes for religion, in my view, is to keep people focused on living their lives in a positive fashion, and not to lose hope, and not to become overwhelmed. And it's so easy, and especially now, and it's so difficult to say, yes, God created both the light and the darkness, and God created order in the world, peace in the world. But also, my translation in prayer, as many of you will know from our prayers, is, and God allows for chaos. That's taking a step back from that God actually creates evil. I'll say God allows for certain bad choices that human makes, for free choice, but also the chaos that comes with a tsunami or an earthquake or a lightning bolt, whatever it might be. I'm reminded really this moment, which is why I don't have it on screen, but I'm going to let me just share a screen to a poem, one of my favorite, not only my favorite, one of the most beloved poets, modern Israeli poets, is Yehuda Amichai, who grew up in a observant home background, but he himself was a secular Israeli. Let's open this up, and the poem goes like this: from a distance, everything looks like a miracle, but up close, even a miracle doesn't appear so. Even someone who crossed the Red Sea when it split only saw the sweaty back of the one in front of him and the motion of his big legs. And at most, a hurried glance to the side, fish of many colors in the wall of water, like a marine observatory behind a wall of glass. And he goes somewhere else with the poem, which is less important to us right now, but we actually read this at our Seder, at our Passover Seder. It's in the Lazar family Haggadah, that, when you think of the people that were crossing the sea, people who were involved in the miracle itself, they don't see. You got to step aside. You got to step back and take a bird's eye view, or as we say today, a drone view from a camera on a drone to see that the miracle is happening. That's my impression here. And then God kind of almost lashes out in the same way God does with Job, right? You dare presume to know what I know? That's the classic line from Job about I've created the world. Were you there when I created the world? And so, but bringing it home in a very, very folksy kind of way, there is an order of things, and the order are creators, craftspeople. There's an order, a relationship between the crafts person and the thing that is being crafted. There's a relationship between children and their parents, and it's a hierarchical relationship. Anything else? Yes, Rita Claire.
I almost get the feeling like we should not be so worried about tomorrow, but concentrate on today.
And do you see that in the text here?
I kind of see it where it says, what are you doing? Your work has no handles. Shame on anyone who asks a father, what are you begetting? Or a woman, what are you bearing? Like it worrying about if what you are making has a purpose, or the child is, for example, a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. It's concentrating on what you have today. I just got that feeling.
That reminds me of in the Talmud. There's a story about two rabbis were looking upon a harbor, and in the Aramaic in the Talmud says Leman, which is a Greek word. That's why I remember the story so much. It's Greek influence on rabbinic Aramaic and Hebrew, and they said, what a funny thing when a boat goes out, leaves the dock, everybody's so happy and they're cheering, and I always think of like the Love Boat, right? In that series, everybody's cheering from down, seeing their friends off, you're on. And then when they come back, there's nobody there to celebrate. They just kind of, he says that's a great parable of life. When a baby is born, right, everybody is so happy. But why should they be happy? You have no idea what's going to happen to this child's life. This child might suffer, might be persecuted, might be a disaster, right? It should be the exact opposite. That was in the context of while human beings are happy when a baby comes into the world and cry when a soul leaves this world, the angels, now I remember, the angels they're worried and wringing their hands when the baby comes into the world. Oy vavoy, what's going to happen? What might happen? What bad choices might this child make? And when the person dies, they're happy. Oh, the soul's back together with us again.
I would think in having children, I always refer to as a lifetime sentence.
All right.
But Rita Claire, I do think what I hear you say is that well, it really gives us, and again, I think this is part of the gift of Second Isaiah, this larger frame of reference, right? It's expanded, so we're now seeing not up close and personal, but the long picture. And it reminds me several years back, I was just in the middle of a panic attack about all the things so close that I couldn't deal with or control or interruptions.
Mhm.
Someone just gave me Psalm 139, and just to read that and expand that frame of reference, then it relativizes my situation in a way that I can take deep breaths and move on.
I think of
Ecclesiastes has that same impact for me. It's like, come on, put it in perspective.
I think of the scripture, don't worry about tomorrow because today has its own anxieties.
Mhm.
Okay. So Rita Claire, would you read the next section for us, which once again begins with "Thus said God," Paul Mar Adonai.
Where are we?
The
Did you
bottom of
say-
the page. The bottom. of the page.
Thus says God.
Mhm.
Okay. Israel's Holy One and Maker. Will you question me on the destiny of my children? Will you instruct me about the work of my hands? It was I who made the earth and created humankind upon it. My own hands stretched out the heavens, and I marshaled all their host. It was I who roused him for victory. And who leveled all roads for him? He shall rebuild my city and let my exiled people go without price and without payment, said God of hosts.
This is playing out. This is the nimshal. In Hebrew, there's a mashal, which is parable, and the nimshal, which is the playing out of the parable. I don't know what it is in English when you have a parable and then explanation, but in Hebrew, it's the same word, just with a nun. Anyway, and it played out. Yeah, that you want to know the understanding of the proper understanding of what I said beforehand in the previous paragraph. It's right now. This is how it plays out, and because it was so unbelievable to people that this would be the way that God would act, I think. Any comments? Okay, let's go on to the next section. Terry, yes, go ahead, Megan.
When I said, don't you dare, after all the conversation, the next part of that is, don't you dare not have hope. Because you have no understanding of what's going to go on, but I am here. I don't know. Don't you dare not have hope. I changed my sentence there.
And that's a major motif in I think many religions, not all, but what I would deem, in my very subjective opinion, what is good religion. Good religion is to reinforce, to give people the resilience to live with a sense of a better future, and not to be exasperated, not to be overwhelmed. Yeah,
I love how you put that. Don't you dare not have hope. It's nice. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Terry, you going to read for us? Thus said the Lord again. Thus said God.
Thus said God, Egypt's wealth and Cush's gains and Sebaite's long of limb shall pass over to you and be yours, pass over and follow you in fetters, bow low to you and reverently address you. Only among you is God. There is no other God at all. You are indeed a God who hides in concealment, O God of Israel, who brings victory. Those who fabricate idols, all are shamed and disgraced. They slink away in disgrace together. But Israel has won through God triumph everlasting. You shall not be shamed or disgraced in all the ages to come.
Reactions or questions?
Is God still speaking to Cyrus?
know. I don't think so, just because the previous Ko Amar Adonai, it seems to be addressing the people. So I don't know, and I don't know if it's easy to tell. I don't know what others think.
To me, it seems like this whole soliloquy is going to Cyrus. He's telling, even in the previous one, he's telling Cyrus about Israel. I mean, maybe I'm not reading this correctly, but it just seems to me.
My opinion that it's for the whole people goes to the content of what's being said. I mean, the whole thing is, that's what was my original answer to. The whole thing is staged, right? The whole thing is going to people of Israel. But afterwards, when it's not as if Cyrus has said to God, "Oh, not you, you're wrong. It's not me. I'm really nothing. Oh, don't put me up on stage and thank me and give me gifts and things like that, and and honor me at a annual concert." That's not Cyrus there. He's talking to the people that they should understand, Cyrus's importance, and only to understand God's importance, that things will get better. To my mind, it seems to be talking to. One question might be why these nations? Egypt, Cush, and the Sabites, or the Sabbatites. Why these? And I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly if there's a historical meaning. I didn't delve into it. Perhaps there's something with Cyrus of Persia and those kingdoms. But I think maybe because of the North African trauma of Egypt, of the enslavement in Egypt, at least the historical. The literary trauma, and there are traditions that there were the Ethiopians, the Cush was involved as well. They're not biblical traditions; they come from not just late Midrash, but some very early Hellenistic writings as well. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think it was because they were wealthy. Those Egypt and Kush and stuff, they were extremely wealthy, known for gold and known for their knowledge of the heavens. And I think that they're named there. And when they say Kush, a lot of people think modern day Ethiopia, but they're really talking Kush in the Bible is the Sudan.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Malka. Thank you.
At the least, it's a remote region. It's yeah. To the, from their perspective.
Anything else? All right, Harold, you want to read for us?
Okay.
We're in the second "Thus said God" on the second page.
For thus said God, the creator of heaven, who alone is God, who formed the earth and made it, who alone established it, who did not create it a waste, but formed it for habitation. I am God, there is none else. I did not speak in secret at a sight in a land of darkness. I did not say to the stock of Jacob, seek me out in a wasteland. I, God, who foretell reliably, who announce what is true. Come, gather together, draw nigh, you remnants of the nations. No foreknowledge had they who carry their wooden images and pray to a God who cannot give success.
Yeah, Don, go ahead.
I don't know, but there's a lot of repetition in these verses that we're reading, and yet there's always something new added. It's like he's expanding whatever he said before, just a little bit more.
So you have admiration for the rhetorical aspect of this.
Yeah, I mean, as I recall, wasn't Egypt ransomed? Wasn't there a ransom involved for Egypt earlier in our reading of Isaiah? It just seems like it's more, the whole thing is more complicated than just these words. I mean, this is a long-standing issue, I think. And the thoughts of God get deeper, but they're also formed in a new way.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know what kind of literary device that is. It's revelatory.
Yeah.
And I guess repetition is a good way to learn.
Yeah. I mean, Don, you've done public speaking, I think, right?
Not as much as I want.
Okay, but you have an appreciation, I think, a well-built. This is not my forte, by the way. I don't really know how to give sermons, proper sermons. I never learned. I just kind of talk. For me, it's more about teaching when I speak. I mean, sermons are always teaching, but it's a very eloquent style of building the argument and repeating. Yeah, if we were to read this through without stopping to talk about it, it would even have probably leave a stronger, deeper impression, I would guess. Yeah.
I think the difficulty for me is that I forget what preceded it all. As we move on to the new chapters and new sections.
You just have to pull it down. So got it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this section's a good example of what I was referring to about that intersection between creation and history, and the images he did not make it to be a waste. I think other translations have chaos, and then I did not speak in secret. In a dark region of the earth, I did not say to the race of Jacob, look for me in waste or in chaos. I think this is, as we mentioned last week, kind of a direct response to the Enuma Elish. That's the Mesopotamian idea of creation that I think scholars say comes from the 8th century BCE, but that would have been the creation story in Babylon where the exiles live. And in the Enuma Elish, which you can just read, it's not that long. You can just Google it and pull it up. It's fascinating. But essentially, Marduk, the valiant god, he is entangled in a battle with chaos, with the waste. That is Tiamat, the mother goddess's domain, and he slays mother goddess Tiamat, and out of that waste creates human beings, and their job is to serve the gods. That's the job of the human beings in that Marduk, in the Enuma Elish, and the difference between the Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 is striking, which comes out of that, that milieu. So I think theologically there's something deep here in terms of the nature of the cosmos and the role of the human being who is in God's image, not just pulled out of the chaos to serve the gods. It's a different vision.
And one might say, along with the reference to other biblical traditions of cosmology, how the world came into being, is a direct relationship to, as you mentioned, to Genesis. The word that they translate with waste is tohu. As you'll remember, that before God created the universe, everything was tohu vavohu. And tohu, it means, well, it often translates unformed and void. But kind of the opposite, the uncreated. So I guess, and you've been saying this kind of, Steve, I think, is that this part is a recreation of the world. The world is being recreated.
Yes.
Recreated, and just this surprising figure is Cyrus is right in the middle of it, right? That's really that's the bombastic part of this, really. It's from a, yeah. Now there's an unpleasant thing we need to deal with at the end of this, why I bolded the words, and pray to a God who cannot give success. In our study together, and so I saw this in Sweden, and this was what bothered me about interfaith dialogue in Sweden, mostly between Jews and Christians. And it felt like it was just a continuation of the post-Holocaust treatment of the trauma of the Jewish community, absolutely necessary. And much of the interfaith, the dialogue between Christians and Jews in Europe, based, lots of the head of the organization at the time was a German pastor, was about us Christians saying, we're sorry for what we did. We need to make amends. And that's an important aspect. But as I mentioned, there was one meeting where there was a new paper. It was never approved. I found out just last month because I was in contact with some of my Swedish friends from the Church of Sweden, that asked all participants to examine their own traditions as to what things have perpetuated hatred, what things have perpetuated disdain for the other. And while Jews, and we've done that in our study a lot, where we often go to those passages in the New Testament that make us feel uncomfortable and make us feel like, maybe you folks should try to reinterpret that. Well, there's stuff from our tradition as well. It's not biblical here because, of course, the Hebrew Bible doesn't relate to Christianity, but medieval Jewish literature does, and our liturgy is part of it. While the previous example of the change in liturgy or the change in liturgy was something that kind of made it more palatable to think, and I believe in moving back to the original verse of Isaiah to say, yes, God allows for chaos. Second one is based on this verse here, the last part we read, Umit Palalim, and they pray to a God who cannot give success, who literally cannot redeem, a God who is not a redeemer. Now, this is pre-Christian, of course, but you all know Jesus's Hebrew names, Yeshua and Yoshia, Yeshua, that's all salvation. And so B at the bottom of the page is the original text of Aleinu L'Shabeach, the prayer that ends all three daily prayers. It begins with, it is upon us to give thanks, to bow down, to recognize that God is the ruler of the universe and there is no other. This chapter, it was very influential on that prayer. And then we get to the part that I didn't know growing up so much. I'm going to read the whole part, but the last part I didn't know at all growing up until I was 14, 15. We started to pray with Chabad because the conservative synagogue, the conservative movement prayer books had already excised this from the prayer, and Chabad had the original prayer. And then of course I went back to taking it out, but the prayer begins like this. This is for everybody in the Jewish audience. This is it is our obligation to praise the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the Creator of the world in the beginning. That God has not made us like the nations of the lands. It's not positioned us like the families of the earth, right? That God has not assigned us a portion like theirs, and God has not, and our lot is not like the lot of the multitude. That is in the traditional, that's in the Aleinu prayer, the way it is still in conservative movement prayer books, the way that most of us grew up with. But if Sid might remember this growing up Orthodox, but then there's where they prostrate themselves to vanity and nothingness and pray to a God that cannot deliver. That's directly from us, and pray to a God, the El Lo Moshia. But we, however, we bow and prostrate, and this is part of the prayer today as well. We offer thanks before the Supreme King of Kings, etc. What I'm trying to say is that this verse gave the inspiration for the prayer, direct quote, in which already in medieval times, this was a polemic against Christianity, absolutely a polemic against Christianity. And it was certainly understood by the church because those lines were actually in places where there was a censor, that the church had a censor on Jewish books, on Hebrew books, and that is a thing. I don't know if it's a fascinating topic. Those lines were censored out, and they were brought back in the late 19th, early 20th century by those that could print on their own without having a Christian power breathing down their neck. Those that are in Or HaMidbar know that the whole negating the other, the whole saying, we're better than you are, we have the truth and you don't, that's taken out of our Or HaMidbar's prayer. And it was hard for some of you in the beginning when I first made that change when we were at the other place. I remember, and I had conversations with people. But this is where this is our mea culpa. This is our Ashanu Baganu. This is where we have to say, even though the verse was written originally in Isaiah, long before Christianity, it became a tool in the hands of Jews, perhaps understandably so, to say, being persecuted, well, what they're doing is a waste of time because the God they called Yeshua cannot be Moshiach, right? El Lo Yoshia.
Mhm.
hope that was a kind of, again, if I had a whiteboard and I would.
Rabbi, you made me think, what about the 19th benediction against heretics?
Yeah.
How have your organization reinterpreted, or if you have reinterpreted?
So Malka, that's something perhaps that's certainly a topic we might even think of, that maybe devoting a time to look at liturgy as well. What Malka is referring to is there's a tradition in the Talmud that one of the blessings was added to the 18 benedictions, which is the pillar of the prayer 3 times a day. And then it was added, therefore it's 19, even though we still call it the prayer 18 benedictions. According to the Talmud, it was a verse that was added to kind of call out, what do you do on social media when you call out somebody? Is that the term? To call out those that were traitors, those that perhaps had converted to Christianity or had become Christians, followers of Jesus, those that were mashtapim, collaborators with the Roman government. It's a prayer that actually changed. We have in manuscripts that prayer. Whoever the bad guys from a Jewish point of view were, they became the object of that prayer. But Malka, perhaps what we learned at Hebrew University together with Avigdor Shenan and Yosef Heinemann, were able to prove that actually that's not the 19th benediction. The 19th benediction is Tzemach David. But what you're asking is what we do. In my own prayer, I don't have that. I have totally reworded it. And I've reworded to those that are doing evil without mentioning a particular people. So this is a little bit too abstract for everybody else because the text is not in front of us, but perhaps we can do that once. What I guess my main point is, the Jewish tradition has plenty to be ashamed of as well, that we need to not cry about what happened in the past, but to make amends by changing the prayer. Because again, when little children, if they listen to those prayers and they see, especially in Hebrew, in Israel, then that creates a certain kind of relationship with the other. Sorry, we got away from the text a little bit. We bring it back. Any questions about that or the text? Okay,
Well,
so
again, it goes back to interpretation and the culture of interpreters and how you apply these texts. I mean, it's real tricky stuff. But that particular verse, and pray to a God who cannot save, in this translation, or offer success, it's in the context of those who carry their wooden images. So it kind of rehearses the futility of idolatry, which we can all kind of agree. If you give your power to something that's ultimately dead and unable to, then there's a futility. But when you apply it to other people, and it gets violent real quick.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, then. Should we do the last one? I've lost track of who's read today. So anybody just volunteer, just speak up and read. Speak up, as the verse says, speak up.
I can do it. So,
Please, go ahead.
all right. Speak up, compare testimony. Let them even take counsel together. Who announced this aforetime, foretold it of old? Was it not I, the Eternal One? Then there is no God beside me, no God exists beside me, who foretells truly and grants success. Turn to me and gain success, all the ends of the earth, for I am God and there is none else. By myself have I sworn, from my mouth have issued truth, a word that shall not turn back. To me every knee shall bend, every tongue shall swear loyalty. They shall say, only through God can I find victory and might. When people trust in God, all their adversaries are put to shame. It is through God that all the offspring of Israel have vindication and glory.
Okay. Again, huge influence. I mean, the Aleinu prayer feels like it was written by the writer of that prayer, had this text in front of him.
You know, in Philippians, there is that same language almost, about every knee will bend. I don't know if they took it from here, but it tracks.
Don, I know in Romans 14, Paul seems to be pulling from this exact text, and he uses it in the context of the community in Rome, which consists of both outsider Gentiles and Jewish Christians, and they're judging each other over their differences. And Paul is saying, don't judge. You know, don't you know that every knee shall bow? So he kind of uses that image to say we're all in the same boat. You know, why are you making these distinctions?
I feel when I see that in Christian scriptures, that kind of technique, that it gives honor to the Hebrew scriptures.
I mean, like we kind of talked about last year, it's acts as a Jewish document. I mean, it's hard to deny that. And I mean, Paul, anyway, yeah, I think sadly they didn't heed that admonition from dear Paul, but again, this seems to be pointing to the nations again. It seems to be a powerful call to the whole world. That's what strikes me.
I know when I read it, I kind of got more of a feel for political or military might and military victories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, everyone. So we're taking a break for a few weeks. Madalena will send out more or less a schedule going forward. There will be times when are you teaching on your own next week? I don't remember, but you'll get something in the mail. Sometimes I'll be on my own, sometimes Stephen will be on his own. We're trying to do most of it together, and we're kind of aiming towards the end of January to finish up this second Isaiah. Okay.
I'm going to miss it.
All right. Well, we'll come up with something else.
Yes.
All right. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for being here.